Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Classical Stuff You Should Know podcast, put on by classy dudes at a classical school teaching classical things.
To classical people?
You should know.
You should know.
Okay.
I'm AJ Hannenberg. I teach 9th grade English, senior English, and senior rhetoric, and I am joined today by Thomas Magby.
Hey.
And he is the Dean of Student Life here at Veritas. He is also just a classical things enthusiast. He actually wanted to invent this school before he knew this school existed.
Yep.
He came to our boss and was like, hey, what if there was a school like this? And our boss was like, you know I work there, right? Like that's our school. And then also I'm here with Graham Donaldson, who teaches 10th grade English, and senior thesis.
Hello.
And we three compose the podcast.
Whee!
Like the three witches of Macbeth.
Yep.
We weave together a spell to enchant you every week.
Boil,
Double,
trouble,
trouble. Fire
something,
burn and cauldron bubble.
When shall we three meet again?
When the
Hurly-Burly's done.
trimester's
When
done.
the battle's lost and won. All right. Today, Thomas is going to be leading us through something. So, Thomas.
Yeah, we'll come up with a topic as we go. No, I'll be talking about Acedia today, also translated as sloth sometimes. So this topic came up during AJ's discussion of the 7 deadly sins from Dante's Inferno, and I went back and listened to that part, and it's great. But we spent 6 minutes on the sin Acedia, and I just thought there's probably a little bit more to share there. So we're coming back to it today. If you hear papers rustling during this, which you probably hear during most of our podcasts, I'm flipping through a book called The Noonday Devil, Acedia, the Unnamed Evil of Our Time, by Jean-Charles Nault. He's a Benedictine monk. It's a very good book. I recommend it.
And I have Calvin and Hobbes.
Yep, that's going to be good. Graham, what do you have?
Oh, there's a tiny squirrel in the bookcase. He's rustling papers.
It's going to be good. All right, so I guess we'll be jumping through the book as we go. So the way the book is organized is kind of how the view of Acedia has changed over time. And so this has been referenced a few times, but so when Aristotle is talking about courage, the way that we understand courage is from looking at soldiers in the battlefield. The courage is that mean between them running headlong into battle and them not going into battle at all. Courage is the mean between those two. And so Acedia, likewise, we only understand because of this group of people called the Desert Fathers. I think of St. Anthony as the most famous of them. I don't know if you have like your favorite, like...
St. Simon, the one who lived on a pole.
Yep, that's a good one.
St. Simon Stylites.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's my favorite. He's just the one I remember.
You just like that story? It's a good
he lived
one.
on a pole.
Yeah.
Who was it? There was one, and I might just be thinking of Martin Luther here, but he farted at the devil when he was tempted.
Don't know
you
that
made
one.
that
that one?
You made
You
that
mean
up.
St. Hannenberg of...
No, honest to goodness, when he was
Washington,
tempted, he would fart at the devil. He's like, one thing the devil cannot take, and that's ridicule. If you make fun of him, he'll go away, because he is very prideful, so he doesn't like that.
I just Googled that, and I kind of regret it, but there's nothing...
You're on a watch list now.
I am on a watch list. Yeah, I'm on Veritas Wi-Fi, so that probably wasn't a great idea. Anyway, devil farts, not a thing. No, sorry, it is a thing. I didn't look into it more than like the first search result. Anyway, here we are. So the Desert Fathers, this group of people who had previously been in big cities, and then they fled to, you guessed it, the desert, to escape the temptations of that life. But as all of them discovered, but St. Anthony probably most famously, is that just because you've escaped from places where sins happen doesn't mean that sins suddenly go away. The desire for that sin is inside of a person, and that travels with the person. So there's, it's repeated in art often, the temptation of St. Anthony. There's also, it's like a short story or short book called The Temptation of St. Anthony.
Is that where there's a guy who always looks real miserable, and there's all these wacky demons like picking at him and pulling at him and little hooks in him?
Yeah, and he's like in a cave, and they're all around him. Yeah. It's a theme. He is a poor guy. So what he and all of them discovered is that sin doesn't suddenly disappear just because you're out in the desert.
You remove yourself from other people.
Yeah, sin is still present. It's kind of... Yeah, there's still this kind of twisted desire inside of the person whenever they leave. So one of those... So they go to the desert, and then one of these people is named Evagrius. We talked about him before a little bit too. And Evagrius is trying to chronicle what are kind of the tendencies of sin that he sees in the Desert Fathers, the monks around him. And one of them is this word acedia. Okay, so I guess we'll start here. Acedia we sometimes translate as sloth. Do y'all have any other like awesome definitions that you are used to using for this?
Despair?
Despair, that's a good one.
Is it laziness? Is it the same kind of thing?
I think of that like that when we say sloth, like laziness is one that
But isn't it? I think it's laziness born of a deep spiritual despair, right? You don't work because you don't think anything will actually come of it.
Yep.
So that's why you stay at home. It's not because you just tend to like your bed. That kind of goes into gluttony, right? You want comfort. You want to play video games. You want to. It's when you go to comfort and video games and home because you don't think there will be anything, like any fruit of your work.
Yep. Yeah. So the word itself, the word in Greek means a lack of care, a lack of concern. So that is before it's used in any kind of spiritual connotation. There are also uses of, if you just look how the word is used, it kind of denotes this act of not burying one's dead, which is really interesting.
Oh, interesting.
But so then Evagrius brings this term in, and it's no longer just a lack of care about the deceased. It's this lack of care given to one's own spiritual life, and that's what AJ is talking about right there. It's a lack of concern for one's salvation. It's a carelessness. It's an indifference. And I think those kind of get more at, like, yeah. I guess I hadn't heard the laziness brought into gluttony before. Is that in Dante? Like, does he tie those two together?
I think this is more my clear understanding of it. And I could be totally wrong about this. But
no, I like that, though.
But gluttony is the pursuit of personal comfort to excess, right? Where you go so far that you would deprive others was a piece of it when we talked about the 7 deadly sins. Like you consume so much food that someone else is going without, and to an unhealthy level. But laziness, I think, can stem from a couple different things. It can be just because you really like the couch and you like sleeping, or it can be that you despair at the thought of actually doing anything.
Yeah. And we'll get to eventually, I'll throw it in right here. So despair, so Aquinas, for each of the cardinal sins, there's the sin itself, and then there are the children of those sins, and despair is the first child of Acedia. It's the first and worst of the children is despair, that giving up, that there is no hope. But we'll get into that a little bit later. Acedia also, so we're talking about this hopelessness, but that hopelessness has some different aspects to it. And again, originally understood by Evagrius, there's this temporal dimension, this spatial dimension. And so when we talk about the noonday devil, we talk about Acedia coming at a specific time for the monks because they were supposed to be in their room praying and fasting between 10 and 2, 10 and 3, just kind of that afternoon time. But what happened was, instead of it feeling like the 4 or 5 hours that it actually was, that time would feel like it's 50 hours. It would feel like it's a never-ending amount of time between your prayer in the morning, the daily office, and then your the evening prayer at the end. I think this is something that we still see today, that like people talking about the work that they have to do. It's no longer like a pleasure at the work. It's, I don't know, when you all assign homework and that it's reading Paradise Lost, let's say, a great book that we were just talking about on the last episode, instead of it being like, I spent an hour reading this, do you ever hear from students, this took me forever?
Yeah, and I think it's a little hard to gauge whether they're being not that they're outright lying, but to them, the perception of how long something took must have been 4 hours because it felt like it. I remember I had to practice piano 30 minutes a day every day when I was a kid, and Mom would put it on the stove, put like the countdown, a timer on the oven, and while I was practicing, and I would practice, and I would look up, and I was convinced she was bumping up the time because there was no way it's only been 3 minutes.
Yeah.
It felt like eternity, and I think that's the feeling that they're talking about when you are engaged in something. And I think, is it always something that's actually for your benefit? That time feels like it's taking forever?
That's a great point. So in this context, it is. But what would the alternative be? Like you're sinning and it feels like it's taking forever?
Or some sort of pain, like if you're in the dentist office or something and it feels like it's taking forever? I think it's a different thing.
Come a point where you are sinning and you have sinned so often that it is no longer bringing much pleasure, and now you're just going through the motions because it's what you know, and it feels like it's taking forever. And I think that's where Satan is the happiest, right? He has not only coaxed you into sin, but taken away all the pleasure of it.
Right. Sorry, just this still makes me want to read Paradise Lost, like talking about that.
I think that was Screw Tape.
Oh, even better. So there's a temporal dimension. There's this time things. So these good acts that. Just AJ, you saying that makes me people that are trying to like replace something in their life. So Graham, your example was Graham. Did you just talk about video games taking the place?
That's me.
Okay, so sorry, AJ. I'm just going to talk about all of your great ideas. So someone wants to move away from playing video games all the time, and so they're like, I am not going to play video games. I'm going to read my Bible. Imagine that first day of them doing that. And whereas they could have spent 4 hours playing video games very easily, 4 hours of reading the Bible would probably feel like an eternity, right? They're just not used to using their time that way. And so that would be Acedia. That would be Acedia. That would be the restlessness of moving into that good. The other dimension of it is a spatial dimension. This feeling of being hemmed in, this feeling of being stifled. This again, we understand primarily from the monks that they felt like they had to get out of their cell. They even call it a cell, isn't that something? They had to get out of their room between 10 and 3, but only because they were supposed to be in their room between 10 and 3. It's like if I say, I'm going to pray, so Graham leads this morning prayer group, and so if I said, I'm going to be there every day at 7:35 to pray, and I came and then I suddenly felt, I need to be out of here. It's only because I committed to that prayer that I feel like I then have to flee. I have to escape. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you have people running out during your morning prayer.
I don't know. We don't. But I wouldn't say it's well attended.
Yep.
But I understand like that thought that when you have a thing that you've dedicated yourself to, I'm going to fast today, so that I can focus on this thing that I'm going to be praying for. Your relationship with food. Oh, it's just I cannot wait for this day to be over,
right.
Kind of thing. Whereas I would never think about my day if I wasn't trying to better myself.
But I guess what's strange is like there's nothing on the other side of that day that will like release the pressure. Like it's this feeling that time has stood still while you're in the middle of this good thing, but on the other side of that is, I don't know. There's not a better thing on the other side of that.
Funny story about morning prayer. After a holiday, I had sent out an email just to everybody reminding people that morning prayer happens. And my subject heading on morning prayer was morning prayer. That was the subject heading. And someone got the email and they only read it from the side, like they were driving and they saw the email pop up. And they thought it said, morning player. and then she was like, why is Donaldson emailing
the
me?
entire high school?
Morning player.
Morning player. So when I see that particular faculty member on campus, I say, morning player.
And every email from now on is some variation.
Anyway.
No, perfect. So
it's a spiritual, it's like almost...
So time stands still.
Is it your fallen nature wanting to rebel against
the good, right?
Like
Yeah.
rebel against the good.
Yeah.
And probably habit, too, right? The more often we do something, the easier it is.
That's right. This book makes this really big distinction between a habit and a habitus, and unless you all are smarter than me, I couldn't figure out the difference.
One is Latin.
Thank you. God bless
Yeah.
you. So we get into later that, so when we talked about leisure many podcasts ago, we talked about how the difficulty of a thing does not make it good. So because a thing is hard does not mean it's good. Mm-hmm. If the thing is good, that makes the hard work worth it. Mm-hmm. Okay, so virtue, we grow in loving virtue by practicing virtue, and then we get to a point where our instinct is virtue. That practice of virtue is a habitus. The external acts that we do are habits, is how this is distinguished later. So we overcome this acedia through the practice of virtue, through habitus. But we're still talking about the problem itself. We'll get to solutions for it, because this is one, like, he actually has a solution to acedia. We're going to solve sloth on this podcast.
You guys, we did it.
Yeah, we did. Yep, problem solved. I like to end my leadership classes like that sometimes. Well, we just solved that. And
We did it.
Yep.
Congratulations, everybody.
job, boys.
Everyone's like, I don't think we actually did.
Yeah, people say that the questions that don't have answers are the best questions. And I'm not sure that's true. I think questions that have hard answers are the best questions.
Yeah. Okay, so again, we're talking about Evagrius, Desert Fathers. What does acedia look like? And again, he is writing to these people who are in the desert, and they are monks, and they are separated from society. But I think this still describes people today. He has these 5 principal manifestations of acedia. So what does acedia look like in a person? And I'll read all... I guess I'll just start going through them. So the first one is an interior instability. So when we talked about that, the spatial dimension of acedia, it's that one does not feel at peace with oneself. One has to be somewhere else. One has to do something else. One has to change. That's an interior instability, that they have to change something, anything, and that will make them right. They are a runaway. They're a deserter who flees the spiritual battlefield. Is how.
Does this manifest itself in people doing anything? Like, is this the midlife crisis where all of a sudden you go and you buy the sports car? Is this the, I need to get out of this town. I've lived here for so long and my life is slipping away and I need to go do some sort of amazing thing?
Yes. Both of those examples are brought up later in the book. The feeling of the need to move when really there's nothing in that other city that's like better than where you are. Mm-hmm. He, as one of his manifestations, I'll skip to it, is neglect in observing the rule. And when he talks about that, he's talking about the rule of St. Benedict. And so the rule of St. Benedict is about stability, is one of the points, conversion and obedience. Stability to the Benedict literally means staying in one place.
Yeah.
It's that feeling that one cannot stay in one's place, even though that's the life you've committed yourself to.
Committed yourself to this specific monastery in Norcia or the specific monastery wherever. And then you've got this feeling like, that was a terrible decision and I need to get out of here. Whereas what's over there is very similar to what is here.
Yep.
And you are not any different.
You'll be the same person when you go to that other place. There's an exaggerated concern for one's health. Again, specifically, the concern that the monk had was they suddenly became ravenously hungry. I thought this was a funny description. So again, between 10 and 2 or 10 and 3, they're fasting. So at the 3rd hour, acedia causes shivering, headaches, and vertigo. By the 9th hour, the patient has recovered his strength, and when dinner is ready, he jumps out of bed. So they suddenly became very sick just because they're fasting for 4 or 5 hours during the day.
That's funny.
Yeah, this one probably doesn't land as well with us because there's not as much fasting. I don't know. Have you all fasted? Oh, whatever. You're not supposed to talk about it, but
yeah. I mean,
or know someone who's fasted, and you're like, or you can tell that they're fasting because they're. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, I've fasted for things before, and yeah, it's true. Like on a regular day, on a regular day by lunchtime, maybe I'm hungry, but on a day where I'm specifically fasting, like everyone is food, or
everyone looks like the turkey legs like you see on cartoons.
Yeah, everyone, and the food that they have, and you're sort of hyper aware of their food, and it's your heart. Like you said, I'm going to fast because of whatever reason.
Yeah,
and then it's your body. It's like your little fallen spirit saying like, I'm going to make you focus on food and not focus on this particular thing that you're praying for, this particular reason why you're fasting for it. Whereas on any other day, you wouldn't even be thinking about it.
Yeah,
you just be doing work.
I also feel whenever I fast that I want to tell everyone that I'm fasting, which is like the one thing that you're commanded not to do while fasting. I think, it's an exaggerated concern. Like I want everyone to know, like, oh, how hard life is for me right now.
Yeah. No, that's true. Yes.
But you all are holier than me, and so
no, I think the last time I fasted, I make sure people knew.
No, I just skip meals on accident. I've never actually.
You just forget. This is because you work too hard and you love the school too much. So.
Also, I'm lazy when it comes to food. I'm just forgetful. Yeah.
So when you talking about this, is this a similar thing to like when Thoreau says most men live lives of quiet desperation? Is this kind of the same? Is that the sentiment? The same sentiment?
Can you say more?
That people are living these lives of quiet desperation. This idea that people don't have a plan or a purpose, or they're just sort of going through the motions, and deep down, if they ever thought about the plans and the motions that they're doing, they'd kind of freak out about it.
Yes.
We're doing Hamlet in senior English, and I'm becoming convinced that acedia and the problem of acedia is a really big topic in Hamlet. Because there's this one moment where Hamlet is looking at men who are going to march off to their death. And he has this thought where he says, they're marching off to their death for some battle that doesn't mean anything. And they're doing it, they're seemingly doing it with their will, like fully knowing that this is what they're doing. And he says to himself, do they know something about life that I don't? Like, are they willing to die and because they've settled their hearts on this being a noble purpose and I've just never figured it out? Or am I actually the person that's figured out what life is and they're just going through their lives, going through the motions, and they're these sort of like sheep people who are not even thinking about their life? So my point is, like, Thoreau says...
So the army has acedia in that case?
Or back and forth.
Hamlet often accuses himself of lack of initiative, right? Something we talked about in my class, going back to the tripartite soul. He's got the intellect and he's got desires, but he cannot... His intellect is not spurring him to action.
He's got no will.
He accuses himself of that more than once. And one of the times that he does it is when he sees this army marching off and he's like, they are going and fighting over this patch of land that means nothing.
They're all willpower.
Yeah, and they're going to go and they're going to fight this fight. And I have all kinds of reasons to be doing stuff. Like, my honor's besmirched, my dad is dead, my mom is married my uncle, and it's weird, and I don't like it, and I'm responsible for all this justice, and I'm doing nothing. And so he accuses himself of, this lack of will. And then eventually it just spirals down in Hamlet to, if you're in my class, spoilers, watch out. It spirals down into him taking no action until the moment is come, and he's like, I'm just ready for it, and that readiness is what matters. And he hasn't really done much except put on a play once.
Yep.
But his musing of it is, am I am I right in overthinking because I really want to make the right action, or am I wrong in not acting because I'm not acting? Like, I feel like the person who has the vice of acedia can really justify their inactivity or their laziness through lots of good reasons.
Yes. Well, and so
what they think are good reasons.
Yes, but so the hard thing for the monk is that they're supposed to be in their room praying for those hours, but what they want to do is go and encourage another person.
Yeah,
they
exactly.
want to go to another monastery and give them a really rousing speech on the love of God. They want to go to the local city and evangelize and bring people to the Lord. But what they're called, I think of your talk on Paradise Lost, that there's a thing that they are called to. There's a vocation given to them. They're rejecting their vocation in order to do another good thing. And so by rejecting their vocation, they're doing a wrong. And so it's a lack of faith in God that he will take care of the other monastery or will reach the people of the city. Your question on cowardice, the answer is yes, if that falls under acedia. We'll go into this right now. So we said the first thing that flows out of acedia, we said was despair. What flows from acedia are two things, many.
Yeah, how many
things.
kids are there?
Many children.
Many
And they're all
children.
very bad. You don't want to be in this family. The sin described here is where we flee the acts that sadden us. And so what you're describing with Hamlet is he avoids the things that lead to the end. Here again, he does this in the way of faint-heartedness. He avoids the acts that lead to the ends that are advisable but difficult. And that's, he should have stood up and done something and instead chose not to. Isn't that what you're describing right there? So absolutely, that would be faint-heartedness. And we were having a conversation just before we hit record on the podcast that faint-heartedness is in opposition to magnanimity or great-souledness. Hamlet is making himself a smaller, weaker, lesser person instead of acting nobly, acting greatly. So yeah, absolutely, that would fall under acedia. Okay, I'm going to jump back to the signs of acedia, and then we'll go through all the children, I guess. Man, this is going to be good. Okay, this has given us a direction to go with this. Okay, so exaggerated concern for one's health is a sign of acedia. Another sign of it is...
You say exaggerated concern for one's health.
Yes, that was what we talked about for the fasting and where suddenly people get headaches and...
It's fascinating that this book is like the modern... What's the subtitle of the book? The modern...
Acedia, the unnamed evil
modern,
of our
yeah.
times. I think he's spot on with that.
With the fascination with one's health.
Yeah. And just to say, so Evagrius, Desert Father, long time ago, but the book is written by Jean-Charles Nault, so he's a still living Benedictine monk, and he is summarizing that work. He'll eventually get to Aquinas, because I can't let a podcast go by without talking about Thomas Aquinas.
So if you were playing the classical stuff, you should know
Bingo?
Bingo
Yeah.
at home.
Yeah.
That you can Thomas references Thomas can be your little square.
I feel like it would be 25 squares of Thomas references Thomas Aquinas would be. Yep. Nailed it. Okay. So over concern for one's health. Next one is aversion to manual work. The funny one about this is that the way that the monks would make money, do y'all know this? Do y'all know how monks made money?
Beer.
Beer. No. Well, I mean, yes, but not in this case, because we can't talk about the devil's brew on this. So they would knit the, I don't know if knitting's the right word. They would make these like baskets. They would make these like wicker kind of baskets, and then they would go to the town to sell them. And if no one bought them, they would come back and they would unmake them. They would take apart the baskets they made and then put them down, and then come back the next day, make a basket, go to town, try and sell them, come back, take them apart. Like, AJ is opening his eyes in terror right now, because doesn't that sound like horrible? Like,
It sounds awful.
yeah, because I think it sounds meaningless. Like, I mean, that's kind of like,
Yeah, me too.
Your work kind of doesn't matter. But the reason they did this work is because it didn't require the full mental faculty to be making baskets and taking them apart. So it let you pray while you were making those baskets. And so that was the reason they picked a simple, quote, whatever, a simple task to do. But someone who is under the influence of acedia, someone who is influenced by acedia, only sees the meaninglessness of the activity, and so
And not the benefits.
not the benefits of it, and that's the aversion to work.
But it makes you wonder, like, once you got up a stock of baskets, or how many baskets can you sell before a town don't need no more baskets? And then, like, can't you make something else that's simple that other people actually need and do a good for
but it's not
community?
It's not about the basket. Like, that's the beautiful thing, that the work process itself is about the worker there. It's about that person being able to grow closer to the Lord, to pray to the Lord, to be praying for other people, instead of about the product that they're making. I don't know. I'm also, the business major in me is like, this could be so much more efficient. But
I feel like you could have a best of both worlds there. Like make some stinking
Make something
baskets
else,
and
yeah.
then switch to stinking blankets and make some blankets. That doesn't require the whole
but they
thought
weren't good at
process
making
either.
blankets, isn't that?
I don't know.
Yeah, I hear you.
That's me. That's the modern in me, I guess.
Nothing wrong with that. They were in the desert. They didn't need blankets. Maybe I guess it gets cold in the desert.
It gets cold at night,
Right there.
and there's scorpions. You got to keep the scorpions off
Need
you.
a scorpion blanket. Do we just invent? Sorry. Okay, that's aversion to work, and then I already talked about neglect and observing the rule. Which primarily manifested itself in not praying, and this is, this is one I see still today. That so people will get into a sad place, and their focus turns to what can I do to get out of this instead of praying to God, believing in the sovereign God who can help them in that situation. That would be another sign of acedia creeping in. And then just a general discouragement at the end. There's some stories here, but I'll skip over those. So a feeling of discouragement, aversion to manual work, all those things there. But Vigorius, to these 5 things, has 5 remedies for acedia. And again, they kind of go with the causes we just talked about. I'll run through these, and then we'll jump forward to the daughters of acedia, which I think is really interesting. So what do we do for one who shows these actions? So
Ooh, are we guessing?
No. Do you want to do quiz show?
Yeah,
I
I wanna
feel
do
like I
quiz
already
show.
have a bunch of points here because
You're tied 1-1.
No,
right?
we're tied 1-1 for
No,
quiz
no,
show.
but like today,
hasn't
I
been
guessed a
official.
bunch of stuff.
No, it hasn't been
It wasn't
an official
official,
yet. No,
even
sorry.
though I guessed like
Nope.
half the things.
Nope,
I said
nope,
despair.
nope,
that was
nope,
number
nope,
one,
Nope. But okay, that was actually pretty good.
right?
Yeah, it was. Okay, so there are 5.
Doesn't
Of course, Graham doesn't want it to count. Okay, so those are the 5 signs
Check
of
the
acedia.
tape.
What are the 5 remedies for acedia?
Didn't we already say one? Think we can take it off the list.
Which one?
I don't know. I thought we already said one.
Praying.
Praying is one of them.
Yeah. Take that, Hindenburg.
Well, I'm actually writing this down so I actually get this right. Okay.
Working.
Those are combined in one, but well done.
Ora and Labora.
Eat that, Donaldson.
What'd you say?
Prayer and work. Ora and Labora
Are paired together as one. Yeah. Well, because remember, when they're making the baskets,
Yeah,
they're praying
I know.
also.
I guess it makes sense.
There's a tying together of those two. I don't think you'll get the other 4. You might get one of them.
Fighting. No, I'm just kidding.
Yep.
I'm trying to.
of.
So if caring about your health is one of them, is like willful neglect of your person, like not showering or bathing or or flagellation or something. I don't know. I'm thinking of all I know about Desert Fathers.
And who did many of those things.
More fasting, is that I feel like that might be a solution. I don't know. I feel like the thing that would pull me out of acedia is fellowship, like brotherhood.
Buddies,
Not
Yeah.
one of them.
go for a jog.
Not one of them. Because monastic life, I mean,
Yeah.
monad is one. There's a oneness to it, an aloneness to it.
So is it?
So prayer and work is the only one we've gotten so
Is it
far.
contemplation? The scripture, is that one? I feel like that's an automatic answer that all wants to jump into.
It should be.
Read the Bible.
Yeah.
Kind of brought in with prayer and work because you're praying through the Bible. Actually, I'm going to give you on Bible, the term he uses is contradiction, but the way that one contradicts is through the Bible, and we'll talk about what that is. There's a fancy Greek term for it, but I already know that I can't pronounce it.
You're squashing your hopelessness by bringing pertinent verses.
to the situation.
Right.
Yep. Exactly.
Honestly, so now we're tied again.
Tied again. Tied 1-1.
Thinking about your.
How about
death.
one more guess? You want 2 more guesses? What do you want?
Yeah, well, 2 more guesses.
2 more guesses. Great.
Each or just
Each.
okay.
I do not think y'all are going to get these other 3.
Memento mori.
Yes, meditation on death. Yeah. Think on death.
Oh, that's just because it was in Hamlet recently. I feel like that's cheap.
You also teach senior English.
I know, but I wasn't going to bring it up. It felt too easy.
2 more.
I mean, I'm trying to think of something that would end in forgetfulness of self.
So, can I give you a hint?
Sure, because I feel like that's one of the things is that if you are despairing of your own self-improvement, that's a very inward focused thing. And if you can find something that would focus you outwards, that would bring hope.
Yes.
So is it service? Is that one?
Yes. I'm going to give you the point because it's sticking with that service. It's acedia is like you can start with service and still be impacted by acedia. It's that you'll give up eventually. So it's perseverance is one of them.
Okay.
It's that you start with something and you keep with it. And so, absolutely for service. So you all are then tied. It also says Gaga on my sheet because you GAGA.
Oh, because
Graham
Graham had a
AJ,
point.
Graham AJ. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why don't we do the quiz show with I mean, we only do it when he's leading the podcast.
I'm very okay with that because I would get all of them wrong. There's one more left. Does anyone want to go for it?
Only
I
one
think
more
it's a surprise.
guess.
I think it's a surprising one.
This is
Amazing.
Yeah, the
radio
podcast
for the
radio.
podcast.
Just all the sounds.
right,
can I go for it?
I
Great.
was thinking
go for it.
smooching. Like that always. Just kidding.
That'll do it. Yep, those monks and the
I feel
smooching.
great about
How did
life.
you know? You're a great monk. Tears. The last one is tears, which might be kind of surprising when acedia is tied with despair and sadness and all those things right there. But
Is it just cry it out? Like have a good cry?
it's so all of these.
I can buy that.
Yeah, so
I feel
I can
buy
great
that.
after a good cry.
Yeah, some catharsis.
But it's also that so all of these things are done unto, they're done before, they're done to, I guess, God, and so it's not attempting to save oneself anymore. It's that moment of like giving up to God. I can't care for myself. I cannot will myself to stay in my room for 5 hours to pray. I cannot will myself to fast well. I cannot will to do these things. God, I need you to change me.
So
So
one of them is
tears-
perseverance and one of them is giving up.
To God. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like God, work on me. God,
Okay.
I need you.
Like,
to.
Gotcha.
So I guess kind of a spiritual abandon.
Yeah.
Like rather than being the opposite of perseverance, it is leaving that perseverance up to someone other than yourself.
Yes.
But not in despair. It's
in
an
despair.
abandonment in faith.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a hope tied to it.
Yeah, yeah.
Or like reaching out the other. I mean, if you've ever seen a movie none of you should ever see, Fight Club. If you've ever seen Fight Club, it's like they say once.
What?
Well, once you hit bottom,
Sinner.
that's the only time that you can truly be free. And
Yes.
if that's what this means, like you hit the point where you don't think you can improve yourself, and so you give it over to someone who can.
Yeah.
Somebody's not following the first rule.
Oh, you're not supposed to talk about Fight Club. Sorry, that was. Anyway, so
Hey, I'm not in the club. I can talk about it all I want.
so what the author talks about here is that to weep is to acknowledge that one needs to be saved. So it is that point of being at the end of oneself. I like this. So from our topic on the ways of reading scripture, I like this kind of metaphoric way of thinking about tears. Tears have a second meaning. They're like water that falls on a hard rock and over time manages to penetrate it. So that hard rock is our heart that is being changed. So I like that as an analogy.
So run through them again.
So first one is tears. It's that admitting that, acknowledging that one needs to be saved. There's just this quote at the end that I was reading. Sadness is burdensome and acedia is irresistible, but tears shed before God are stronger than both. I thought that was really good. The second one is prayer and work. So in response to the desire to not pray and to not work,
Is to do
You
it.
make
to
some
do those
baskets.
things. Yeah, and even what's funny is so perseverance
Is
is
that
point.
some sort of basketball analogy?
No,
they make baskets.
Pray and you work. You make
making the baskets. Never gotcha. I was like dropping threes.
You gotta do your free throws, your daily free throws. You just work and you pray.
But so perseverance is point number 5, but also
is
perseverance
life.
is in one of the quotes given here for prayer and work. So many of these are tied together, but a quote from Evagrius: "Perseverance is the cure for acedia, along with the execution of all tasks with great attention and the fear of God. Set a measure for yourself in every work, and do not let up until you have completed it." Which is really good. The next one is contradiction, which is where Scripture comes into this, and so it's the use of. So it takes its example from Christ in the desert against Satan.
Yeah.
Whereas Satan would offer, he would say one thing to Christ, but Christ would counter that with. Either a verse or another verse if Satan had quoted it, depending on which part of it. When Satan quotes Scripture, Christ quotes Scripture right back. So the use of a verse from Scripture to confound the devil. When evil thoughts come into one's heart, the goal is to dash them against Christ immediately. And they use Psalm 137 here, which is just a really interesting spiritual reading of that verse. It's a really tough part of the Psalms where they talk about like killing all of like the children of Babylon, right?
Yeah, it's a rough one.
It is, but the reading that they take here is that it's not actually go and kill those people. It's there are these evil thoughts that are coming after you, and what you are to do is to
Dash them against the rocks.
the rock of Christ. Yeah. So it's a spiritual reading of that.
That is a much more enjoyable reading of Psalm 137.
That's good. Then the next one is to meditate on death. Graham said memento mori, which remember that you shall die. Isn't that, yeah. Isn't the famous story that Caesar had someone who would...
Wasn't Caesar. It was Marcus Aurelius, I think, and he would hire a slave to stand next to him, and whenever somebody came in and was like, "Oh, great Emperor Marcus Aurelius, you are the most amazing thing. Your empire stretches to the heavens," the slave would lean over and say, "You are but a man, and you're going to die one day."
Yeah.
as like a counterbalance to your pride, or as a counterbalance to thinking that you were amazing.
As a slave, I feel like that would be a great job.
That'd be an awesome job.
Like there's a
Getting
lot of
talked down
jobs
to
you
the-
don't want as a slave, but telling your master that he's going to die one day, I feel like that's you get promoted to that job. That's not the menial work.
And I guess for him, it was to bring him down to earth and say that you're humble and you're mortal and you'll die. But what this is about, so
this is an elevating.
This
kind
is an
of
elevating because
memento mori.
death for the Christian is excellent. I mean, it is to be with God. It is to see Him and be with Him. So
and also one day the toil of life is going to be done.
Yeah.
And the fallen and living in a fallen place. There will be, Revelation chapter 20 is going to happen one day where there are no more tears, and every knee bows. So that it is. So I can see how a memento mori in this is kind of doing double duty.
Yeah.
It's humanizing you if you're feeling too high up, but it's also humanizing you if you're feeling too bestial or you're feeling too lowly.
yeah, that's good. That I've done some counseling training and through the Christian Counseling Education Foundation, which is great. CCEF, go check them out. Yeah, the first lecture that they do in the fundamentals of I forget if it's fundamentals of biblical counseling or dynamics of biblical counseling. It's one of those two names. But the first lecture that they do is an hour and a half description of heaven. And that's
awesome.
that is how they start a discussion of counseling. And I just think there's something to that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
That what sin wants to do is curve us inward and to look only at the despair, only at that sadness. But we have a great hope. And death is, in a weird way, a part of that hope. And so reminding oneself of, man, when I want to flee from here and experience some earthly pleasure, it is incomparably beneath the heavenly pleasure I will experience, and that I can experience in some small way right now by staying and praying and growing toward God. Cool. So I like that. That's to think on death, and then perseverance is to stick with things. Very similar to praying and working, which was one of the other ones, but just stick with things is really what it is. So there's a part of like human volition in this of like you choose to stick with that thing, but that's why I'm glad tears comes first, is that you have to recognize that you need God and that you can't will yourself to perfectly do all these things, but you still try. I mean, you still want to serve God faithfully. Okay.
At some point, are we going to talk about why the author's argument is that this is the unnamed modern sin of the times?
Oh, this is actually the one part of the book I was going to skip. So God bless you. So
And the reader is just rolling their eyes, or the listener.
so let me.
Was that a God bless you in the way that Catherine Ball says "bless your heart," where maybe she's not necessarily blessing your heart?
Am I cursing your heart? Is that
Like
No,
the
it's
southern
like,
way you say, "Oh, bless
you
their heart," they're an
poor
idiot.
child.
Oh no, it's a
Bless
great
your
question.
heart.
No, sorry. Okay, so Evagrius is writing.
Poor Catherine.
What, can we make fun of her?
We
at
love
all?
you, Catherine Ball.
Yeah, she's great. So Evagrius is writing in 345 AD, and then Thomas Aquinas, not quite 1,000 years later, but whatever, roughly, is going to write more on Acedia, which we'll talk about in a second. But then from Thomas Aquinas to today, that word Acedia disappears, and that's because Evagrius has these eight wicked thoughts, 8 evil thoughts. Acedia is one of them. Well, with Aquinas, acedia and sadness get combined into one, which is sloth.
Yeah, I think we talked about that on the Seven Deadly Sins podcast.
But from Aquinas to today, there's William of Ockham, I think is the guy that they talk about, and he removes acedia at all from his list of sins. And so that's why it's lost in that sense, that it used to be a thing that was talked about up until the Middle Ages, right, until the scholastics, and then it's lost, so to speak, from that. So it's a recovery of that term.
Occam and his razor, just shaving
Cut
it
off
down.
yep, did it. How dare he?
Different Occam, right?
Nope, same Occam. William of Occam.
Really?
Yep.
Yeah, see, you know these things. I just read it in a book once. Okay. So that's why it is the unnamed, almost literally, because, I don't know, outside of classical Christian circles, how often do you talk about acedia?
It's true. Oh, and for the listener, Occam's razor is not that he shaved off acedia. That's me at a poor attempt of joke. Occam's razor is something about
Simplicity, isn't it?
The simplest
yeah, the
answer
simplest
is
answer
typically
is
the right one.
typically the right one.
Which is a good one.
Occam's razor.
Except he's never watched Ancient Aliens.
Straight facts. I think the other reason it may have disappeared is just because we have moved to a different view of man. Like as an evolutionary based society, on the large part, we see man as not needing improvement. And so why would you ever despair of being the thing that you are? You don't need to change.
Yeah.
Right. And I think, I mean, a lot of people get sad, but it becomes less about sadness of I think it becomes a more confusing sadness when you don't understand kind of where it's coming from.
Or if the human heart does feel this kind of despair, we've either pathologized it and said something along the lines of like, you are sick or your brain chemistry is all screwed up. Or we've also sort of externalized it and said, well, it's not a human spiritual dissatisfaction. It's some sort of outside cause like the modern economy or
You're not getting enough exercise.
Or the breakdown of family units because of the internet or whatever, right? And we always want to find some sort of outside factor that we say is causing a spiritual malady, because we don't want to say the human heart is wicked and broken and needs fixing and needs Jesus.
I just came across this article from David Hicks, who we talked about before about norms and nobility.
Hopefully friend of the podcast. David, you out there? I have no idea.
I hope
so.
You think he's one of those listeners?
Well, he lives in rural Montana.
Can we mail him?
I mean, there's not a lot to do in Montana.
That's
so.
true.
So let's burn him a CD and send it out there?
Just wondering if the internet has made it there.
I'm just kidding. Montana is a beautiful place. It's gorgeous.
Who will sit inside and listen to a podcast?
He should. So he wrote Norms and Nobility, this very influential book on classical Christian education. So in 2016, he wrote this article about whether classical Christian education is possible in the modern age.
Interesting.
He said no.
Yeah.
Have you read this?
I have not, but it doesn't surprise me.
And part of what you all are talking about is a piece of that, is that there's no longer this view of man being both this material and immaterial. And that's even the Greeks who were not Christian still had this idea of there being kind of like
A spiritual side.
a spiritual aspect of a person. There are 4 reasons that classical Christian education is harder now than it was ever before. That's one of them. One of them is the loss of an idea of a telos, an idea of there being an end or a purpose of a person. I forget the other two, but
Or an end or purpose that is
like an ideal.
to all people.
Yeah.
I think we have an idea of teleology, but it's an intensely personally crafted one.
Yeah.
You need to come up with your teleology for yourself. You need to come up with what is your reason for being.
Follow your dreams.
Follow your heart, follow your dreams, figure it out. And that's what college is for. And so that's why, you can pay $40,000 to go figure it out and a year.
Yeah.
And it's
I like that addition. Per year.
and so we've kind of we can still since our hearts are wired for purpose, but when we can now turn it in, we can sort of commoditize it, and we can say, here is a market so that you can go and if you still haven't found what you're looking for, you can go and try this other thing. And I don't know.
You are describing his article almost to a T.
That's good. I hear the U2 song in my head, right? Still haven't found what I'm looking for. This idea of just sort of going off and trying all of these various different things. Whereas in the classical world, it was human beings have a telos.
Yep.
Here it is. This is what it is.
Yep.
It is the good life. It is happiness.
And here are some prescriptions for how to follow
Yeah.
it. I was actually wondering, as you talked about the 5 solutions, how much has modern psychology proven some of those things to be effective for depression, or to be effective as solutions for man's soul, and how we are trying to sort of find these same solutions, but we're doing it through a different avenue, right? We're trying to do it through modern psychology and lab studies rather than like the tried and true wisdom of the monks. It's a kind of a different thing, but I'm wondering if we are ending in the same place.
So this, have you all read Pursuit? No, it's not Pursuit of Happiness. Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning.
I've not.
So
Never read it.
Viktor Frankl is he's a Jew who lived
Survived the Holocaust.
Survived
right?
the Holocaust, and that's what he wrote, Man's Search for Meaning, about the experience of people going through the Holocaust. And so he is kind of discovering like who made it through, like what traits were there of people who made it through, and there was this like hope, like that there was a meaning to anything that was happening, that there was something on the other side of it, led to them making it through the concentration camps. He then developed a field of psychology called logotherapy, and so logotherapy is what you just said. It's like ascribing. It's kind of picking a telos for yourself is logotherapy, and so you give a meaning to your life. So yes, like it's a secular answer to, the Greek idea of telos is also secular, so that's not a good way of phrasing it. But there's a modern psychological version of what has been a classical solution. Instead of it being there is a telos, it's you pick one.
This is reminding me of theology. The study of theology in the Middle Ages was seen as a medicinal art. It was seen as something that you would use to cure spiritual maladies. So it was actually a very practical thing. Oh, well, you're feeling depressed about the world. Well, what you need to do is know that heaven exists.
Yep.
And there's your medicine for you.
Yep.
And here's the reasons why heaven exists, and here's the theology coming from and here's from the book of Revelation or whatever, and here's all of the different passages that have to do with heaven, and here's the story of it. Ingest it, and you'll feel better. I love that. I always love the idea that theology was seen as a medicinal art in the Middle Ages.
So I feel like we've kind of derailed you. We've talked about the symptoms. We've talked about...
Use it. No, I mean, AJ, well, that's part of the fun. But AJ, to your question of have the 5 solutions been kind of borne out in social research? The answer is yes. But is it a theological answer? Is it a religious answer? The answer is no, right? That's...
I mean, yeah, it would be secular, but like the very practices that they do, like work... speak truth to yourself, I think would be the modern version of contradiction, right? That kind of thing.
Yeah. Daily affirmations.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's totally a thing. Yeah.
Or what about the like, if you're feeling weak, just like do a power stance. Like stand with your hands on your hips and
have you heard the
out.
TED Talk? Did you watch that?
Yeah.
Most of that research fell under scrutiny. It has not been able to be replicated, but it's an interesting idea.
You don't say.
Sorry, I apologize. It's a good TED Talk. Okay, so Evagrius writes this stuff, and he, I guess, a piece of what AJ is saying is that like this is unique to the Desert Fathers, for sure. But and so not all of it's going to translate perfectly to the modern context, but that's why we jump ahead about 1,000 years to go into Aquinas. Let's go into the
7 kids.
Yeah.
Nasty little children.
It's just because you mentioned 7. So Evagrius had 8, and they were based on, I think it's 8 tribes that were surrounding Israel in the Old Testament at some point, and so
the Hittites, Amalekites, Jebusites.
You want to go through this?
I used to know them.
Okay, well, this is going to be our next quiz show. Not really, but so what Evagrius says is that each one of those represents a different one of these wicked thoughts.
It's kind of fun.
Yeah, I think so. It's another interesting example of someone. It's not a literal reading of the scripture, but a spiritual reading of scripture, that those tribes each point to a different evil thought or sin. But then Aquinas really likes this idea of 7s. And so he doesn't want there to be 8 of these bad things. He wants there to be 7. That's why sloth then becomes this combination of acedia and despair. But then what flows out of despair as a result of that? So
these are the results of
this is what
acedia?
comes from.
These are the 7...
Yeah, so when we talk about something being a cardinal virtue, or I don't think cardinal vice is the right term for this, but that term cardinal comes from the Latin cardo, which is a hinge, because all sins hinge from that main sin.
Gotcha.
So things come off of acedia. Things
So like
come off
Acedia has a drop-down menu.
Yep. And under that
drop-down menu are all of these little tabs you don't want to hit.
Yeah, and so these are the tabs you don't want to hit. So
it's like recording a macro in Word. You just
is it a bad one.
Well, most people don't know how to use it, so you're like, oh no, there's a record button. What do I do?
And so I don't know. This probably brings it closer to home of like acedia is this fancy Latin term, but like what does acedia actually look like in the day to day? So here's what it looks like in the day to day. So we talked about fleeing the acts that sadden us as being one of those categories. That happens through avoidance. So despair, we talked about, as the first daughter, the most terrible daughter of acedia. It's disgust with the things of God. It's no hope in there being spiritual good. And that's a very sad place to be. That's despair. That's why it's the worst. Faint-heartedness is a lack of courage, which also flows out of acedia. And torpor with regard to the commandments, I thought was a really funny way of phrasing that.
What was the first word?
Torpor. So it's like a laziness, isn't it?
There's one for the book.
State of inactivity or lethargy. Oh. So yeah, torpor with regards to the commandments. Then there are
like thou shalt not murder.
I don't really want to.
Thou shalt honor thy father and mother. Nah.
Or even commands that are like positive commands of pray or fast or things like that.
Okay,
even would be even easier to see. It's just kind of I don't really want to.
Is there like a what good is this going to do?
Yes. Yes. I guess yes, I'll finish this and we'll wrap up with that. Okay. That's probably that will be interesting. So then there are sins that spring from acedia by struggling against what saddens us. And one of the things that can sadden us are other people. And so struggling against other people, they use the fancy term of rancor, but bitterness or resentfulness, especially long-standing. So a resentfulness of other people is a thing that will flow out of this despair.
Resenting. It's like bowling alone, right? Isn't that the
You say bowling alone?
Robert Putnam.
That famous book that says his
People are
thesis
not
is
hanging out
essentially
anymore.
people aren't hanging out anymore, and people are, yes, they're still doing hobbies, but they are becoming more and more isolated in this modern world.
I don't know if it's because of bitterness or resentfulness.
Yeah.
But I could see that happening. So we could point to something like politics becoming more polarized.
Yeah,
And so there's the Pew Research Center has some really fun studies where they look at the number of people who are moderates, and that number is declining as people who are extremely conservative or extremely liberal are increasing. Okay, so that's a thing that's happening. Another thing that's happening is that people who are similar to one another are living close to one another. So people are less exposed to those who disagree with them. It's just a thing that's happened. So there would be bitterness or resentfulness between opposing viewpoints, kind of in that vein. So that's rancor, which is a bummer. And then another thing that comes out of struggling against what saddens us is struggling against the spiritual goods themselves, and that's malice. That's hating of the good, which is not good. Don't do that. And then there's a whole group of things that are wandering after unlawful things. So that's uneasiness of mind, curiosity, used here in a negative sense, loquacity, which is being loquacious, talking a lot. Restlessness of
being
the
a chatterbox, really? If you're despairing, you get to be a chatterbox.
So we talked before about the interior instability, and so one thing that being a chatterbox is an interior instability. It's that one feels like they have to keep talking and talking and talking. A manifestation of that interior unease is talking all the time.
So this podcast could be the three of us
we're experiencing Acedia.
manifesting our Acedia.
I hope we love good things.
We do love good things. We don't have despair over spiritual good.
But one of those things where you said the hatred of good things.
Yes.
This has been something that I've been thinking about in regards to the heroes that we have in more modern movies.
Yeah.
I remember, so when the new, I don't know if it was new, but Superman movie came out, and Superman as sort of our...
Did you see it?
I have not seen it.
I have not seen it.
But
You're in the majority, I think.
but from what I read of reviews is Superman more in this like dark mold, or a lot more of our action heroes are these heroes that are like really dealing with like dark personal trauma, and they're brooding, angry people.
So it's
And
like Superman, but he has a gambling problem?
I know, but we sometimes we sort of see that as like Superman is more authentic because he's flirting with despair and badness. Whereas if we actually had modeled before us a hero that loved the good and wanted good things, we would think of that as sort of naive, right? Like Harry Potter gets darker as it goes on.
I was thinking,
and we think that's somehow more authentic.
Yeah. That's the Dark Knight trilogy,
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
That kind of has to be that edge to it for it to be real.
But I mean, can you think of a hero who loves the good and sort of joys in that good? And sort of like it's just sort of poppy action movies of modern times.
Watson.
It just seems to be like a trope.
Is it Watson?
Yeah, not Sherlock. Sherlock is all messed up on the coke. But Watson wants the good. He has a family. He wants good for Sherlock. He's a soldier. It seems like...
But I mean, he's not becomes a bad guy.
You talking about the TV show, or are you talking about...
I mean, it turns out she was a BBC version.
Yeah.
I mean, it turns out she was like a spy kind of thing, but she loves him. And I mean, it seems like Watson's in pretty good shape. At some point, he does struggle with a little bit of sadness every now and again, but I think he's a decent example of someone who wants and seeks the good.
But he's a supporting character.
Exactly.
That's kind of my
which
point.
is the problem.
Yeah.
And not the hero
And not the
himself.
hero.
And just
Because
like
we wouldn't-
Samwise Gamgee, right?
Because if we had a hero, like I think the modern dispositions, we wouldn't buy it.
Because it's not believable.
Because it's not believable.
Gandalf?
No.
Yeah.
But again, he's a supporting character.
Yeah.
He's not the main...
Frodo can't go home, right? He's too changed by the experience. But I don't know.
We're spoiling all kinds of things all over
This
the
is
place.
this is not a well thought through thought of mine. It's just something I've been thinking about, in that I can't think of heroes that haven't been sort of put into this sort of more modern despair thing because we think it makes them more believable and authentic. Anyway,
I buy
sorry,
it.
Thomas, keep on.
No, I buy it. I think that is spot on. Okay, so wandering after unlawful things, we went uneasiness of the mind, curiosity, loquacity, restlessness of the body, and instability. And again, kind of more in this Benedictine sense of the need to move.
Like move
To
to
get
a
out of
new
here.
place.
Yeah.
Feel like you got to go to a new town or switch jobs or...
Yeah. Any of those things. would be.
Just can't wait to get out of this place and go to college, or just can't wait to graduate and get out of here, or whatever.
Yeah. That'd probably be a very common one for graduating seniors, right? The feeling that I'll get to college and everything will be better.
Yeah.
But your soul is the same.
Yeah.
But I mean, a lot of things will probably be better.
A lot of external things are different.
Yeah, a lot of things will change in college. I found that they did.
I agree with that, but those are all, I don't know, they're all external things. So, like, let's say that I go off to college and all these external things are removed and then I act better. Have I actually gotten better? Like, my sin can still be present. I'm just not manifesting it externally. This is, I think, the difference between a virtue and a habit. That my virtue can remain unchanged, but my habits can be better because that person I fought with all the time, I no longer see them every day.
Yeah. So I don't have to fight with that anymore.
But I still might have hatred in my heart.
Sure.
It's just I surround myself with nice people, and so I never have to experience that. Anyway, okay, so that is, those are the children of Acedia. That's what flows out of Acedia. Also, what came up in the Seven Deadly Sins podcast before is that most of these virtues are in opposition to a vice, and so a question might be, what virtue is Acedia in opposition to? Does anyone want to guess on this one?
I feel like
this could be our tiebreaker.
Oh gosh, what is Acedia in opposition to?
Yeah.
It's not humility. Humility is opposite of pride, right?
I'm not going to answer your questions.
It's not charity. That's greed.
Temperance.
That is one guess for temperance. AJ, what is your guess?
I don't think it's temperance. I think temperance is for gluttony.
Crap, I think you're right.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to spend too long on this. Again, not the greatest
This is riveting
of radio.
podcast
Yeah.
material, I don't understand. That was a trick question, and I apologize. It is in opposition to faith, hope, and charity.
Oh,
Sorry. According to Aquinas. Sorry. Blah. That happened. The way that he...
This game is rigged.
no one wins when Thomas podcast.
But you also, oh, no.
I'm just kidding.
Rend thee the system, Donaldson. We're gonna tear this mother down. So did we tell you about that? We were taking modern phrases and making them ancient. So like rip the system, rend thee the system, and then
Do you even lift?
do you even lift, bro? Was dost thou even heft, brethren?
Or hoist? I think it was hoist.
hoist or heft?
Dost thou even hoist?
Can we need one of those as a tagline?
Well,
for
hoist
the
hoist
podcast.
would imply like a pulley and rope system. So heft.
Yeah.
So against all three, faith, hope, and love is Aquinas' answer to what is Acedia in opposition to, which at one level means to practice faith, hope, and love is to fight against sloth. It's to fight against that interior instability. It's to fight against Acedia. So the reason he comes up with faith, hope, and love being the three things in opposition is this idea of how one loves a thing, how one loves. So, yeah, we'll go through this and it'll talk about how faith, hope, and charity relate into all this, and then we'll wrap up at the end of that. So, trying to think, AJ, when you want, I don't know, like a really cool new DJ thing, walk me through, like, what happens from you realize you need a new DJ thing to you get the new DJ thing? What happens?
First, I really hem and haw over whether or not I really need it. Are we talking like one of my things breaks and I need to replace it?
Yeah, sure, let's do that.
Or like
Even
I
better.
need it. Okay,
So I want it to be something that you want. So if the reason is breaking, that's fine. But it can also be you want a shiny new speaker. I don't know.
Okay, so first I hem and haw over whether I really need it, and then I accuse myself of greed because, and then I ask myself, am I ever going to get any new business? Because with DJing, it's kind of a like, is it going to keep happening? I don't know. People might stop calling me. I don't exactly advertise.
Yep.
So I'm like, is the payoff worth it? Will I pay this off? Do I need this? And I go through this big cycle, and then while I do this, I'm also doing research for what kind of thing that I need, because I found out long ago when you buy cheap tools, you pay for it.
Yeah.
You pay more
for.
for cheap tools than you do for expensive ones, because you have to buy them again.
Yep.
Because they break. So I find a good tool that's reasonably priced, that's going to last me a long time, and then I buy it, and then I feel guilty for a while until I feel like it's paid itself off. That's kind of my whole program. I'm not really like,
No, this is actually
me
perfect.
and money don't have a great relationship.
But let's take that. So you start off and there's a thing that you need, but there's kind of this back and forth of like whether you actually like have to have it or not. But eventually you find the thing that you need. right? So at some point you move from being passive as to whether you need this new thing to intending to buy that thing, right? I mean,
usually I kind of have to like fool myself. I get on Amazon and I'm looking at it and I'm like, yeah, this is the thing. And this, oh, whoops, added a cart. Oh, how'd that happen? Oh, and I checked it. And then I have to feel guilty for a couple of days. And then it comes in the mail and I'm like, well, can't send it back.
So yeah, but that's perfectly, weirdly enough, it's perfectly showing all three of these stages of what it means to go from being separate from a thing and growing to love a thing. So obviously Aquinas would point this toward God, but from Age's example right there, there's kind of this union of intention. So you go from being passive in regards to speakers, passive in regards to DJ equipment, to the point of saying, I need one of those. I need one of those. At the second level, you take action toward that. You take action toward getting, I keep saying a speaker. I don't know the names for any other DJ equipment, so I hope that's close enough to a thing.
Those are things we need. So
speakers are good. Yeah. So your second level is actually taking action.
Music board.
It's good. But at the second level, you take action. You take action to go onto Amazon and click add to cart, and then you buy that. And then the third one, you are eventually united with that thing. That thing is brought to you. A speaker is delivered to your door.
And then we are one.
And then you are one. Yeah. So it's a kind of weird language I'm using here, but that is how love works. Love, it moves from this place of desire or intending a thing, desiring a thing, which is taking action, and then union with that thing. And so, again, obviously Aquinas points this primarily to spiritual things, but God being the ultimate good, so union with God is this ultimate goal. One step before that is we must take action to train our hearts to bring us closer to God. But to have those actions, we have to have an intention beforehand. And so Acedia is a breakdown of all three of those. And so ultimately, Acedia is a breakdown of seeing God as an ultimate good, a thing that is worthy of union, worthy of affection, worthy of time. But it's also, Acedia is in opposition to taking action toward getting closer to God. It's not seeing the usefulness of prayer, not seeing the usefulness of time in Scripture. But then it's also opposed to that first moment of not seeing any purpose and intention. So anyway, that's Acedia. I'll wrap up there.
I'll draw us to a close. And I might note to the listener that we have confirmed that thing that's scratching around under the floor, it's not my chair. There's an animal under the floor, I'm pretty sure.
Super fun.
I think that's fun. So this has been Classical Stuff You Should Know. Thank you, Thomas, for leading us through it. If you'd like to get a hold of us, you can contact us at classicalstuff@veritasacademy.net. You can also check out our website at classicalstuff.net. Yep, same ending there. And you can find us wherever podcasts happen, except for Spotify. You can find us on Google Music, and you can find us on iTunes. We'd love to hear from you. Any questions you have, any suggestions for shows, we want to hear all that stuff. We love to interact with the folks that love the same things we do. So give us a call. Any last words, gentlemen? Oh, we have a quote. I got a commonplace book quote for you. This one is it's from Plutarch's Lives, and this is about Lycurgus and the Spartans. And therefore, as soon as they came to be well grown, they took a great deal of care of their hair, to have it parted and trimmed, especially against a day of battle, pursuant to a saying recorded of their lawgiver, that a large head of hair added beauty to a good face, and terror to an ugly one.
Truth.
So that's a good ending. All right. Thanks again for listening to us, and we will see you next time.
Bye.
See you later.